I spent the whole morning psyching myself up, rehearsing how I'd say, "It's so lovely to meet you," practicing my smile just enough to seem warm but not fake. I wasn't just meeting Liam's family, I was stepping into their world. I wore my favorite dress, the one that made me feel like I had my life together, and heels that clicked too loudly on their polished floors. Their house was overwhelming, big, pristine, like it had been designed more for showing off than living in. I kept my voice soft, my posture straight. I didn't want to give them any reason to judge me. At first, it all seemed fine. His mom smiled, that kind of tight smile you save for customer service calls. His dad shook my hand like he was sizing me up for a job interview. The conversation floated through safe topics: weather, travel, a bit of awkward laughter when I complimented their chandelier. I could feel them watching me, though, measuring. I kept thinking, just get through dinner, smile. Be polite, don't give them a reason to think you don't belong. Then it started. "So, what is it that you do again?" Innocent enough on the surface, but there was something behind it, a tone I've heard before. I explained what I do, proud of it, but his aunt chimed in right after, "Oh, that's sweet." Sweet. Like I just told them I run a lemonade stand. I laughed it off, kept my voice steady. But inside, I felt something shift. I wasn't there to start a fight, but they were begging for one. The questions kept coming, each one dressed up as small talk, but laced with something sharper. "No offense," one of them said, eyes flicking over my outfit, "but do you even make enough to pay rent these days?" I smiled, tight, careful, not because I was okay, but because I've learned that reacting gives people exactly what they want. Liam glanced at me, then quickly away, like he couldn't decide whether to jump in or just pretend he hadn't heard. Spoiler, he chose silence. They were circling me like sharks in pearls. "You know," someone said, I think it was the cousin with perfect teeth, "Liam really needs someone who can match his level." Her voice was syrupy, like she was doing me a favor by saying it out loud. I nodded slowly, my throat tight. It's funny how people can look right at you and still not see you at all. They thought they were being clever, subtle, like their words wouldn't land if they wore silk and smiled while saying them. But I heard every single one. I heard it in the way his uncle chuckled when I mentioned my apartment. I saw it in the shared glances, in the way they asked questions they already thought they knew the answers to. I wasn't angry yet, not fully, just disappointed. I had walked into that house thinking maybe, just maybe, they'd give me a chance. Instead, they gave me a script they expected me to follow. What they didn't know was, I had my own ending planned. I kept my hands folded in my lap, mostly to stop them from trembling, or worse, from slamming a wine glass down on their polished mahogany table. The worst part? I wasn't even surprised. I'd felt the judgment coming the second I stepped through their oversized door. I told myself to be calm, to take the high road. But being calm when you're being dressed down with compliments is like smiling through a slap. It's unnatural, it's exhausting. Still, I held my smile like it was armor. Because that's what it had to be. I'd learned long ago that some people only respect silence when it comes with a smirk. Let them think they're winning. Let them laugh behind their designer napkins and glassware that costs more than my monthly income. Let them think I'm just some sweet broke girl clinging to their golden boy. I knew something they didn't. Something none of them could have guessed. But I wasn't ready to drop it. Not yet. Because here's the thing. I hadn't come there to prove a point. I hadn't come to draw lines or settle scores. I came hoping to be liked, to be welcomed, to be part of something that mattered to someone I loved. But they were making that impossible. And while I wasn't looking for a fight, I could feel it rising in my chest like a tide. They were practically begging for one. And I've never been great at pretending I didn't hear the invitation. It didn't take long for the polite masks to fully slip. One of the aunts, the one with the diamond earrings big enough to blind someone, let out a laugh that cut through the room like broken glass. "She probably still lives with roommates," she said, turning to her sister. "Or worse, her parents." They all laughed, loud, shameless, like I wasn't sitting right there, gripping my napkin so tightly it was starting to tear. I looked at Liam. He was busy buttering a roll like it was a full-time job. I wanted him to say something. Anything. A small, "That's not true," or maybe just, "Hey, don't." But he didn't. He wouldn't even meet my eyes. And that silence, That silence hurt more than the insults, because it told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't being brought into the family. I was being brought before a jury, and the only person who could have stood up for me was too afraid to lose their approval. So instead, he watched me drown, quietly hoping no one would notice the bubbles. My fists clenched under the table, hidden by linen and fake smiles. I kept smiling too, like I didn't hear what they said, like my face didn't feel hot, like I wasn't counting every breath just to keep my cool. I knew I couldn't let them see me crack. Not yet. They wanted that. They were poking, pushing, testing the limits of how much I'd take before breaking. What they didn't realize is I'd already passed the point of caring. They had no idea what was coming next. I took a sip of water I didn't need, mostly to buy time, to cool the fire building behind my ribs. But then his mother tilted her head and asked with a sugary smile, "So what's your long-term plan, Jane? You know, once you figure things out?" I bit the inside of my cheek, hard, the way she said it, like I was just wandering aimlessly through life waiting to be rescued. Like I hadn't worked for everything I had, like being with Liam was the best upgrade I could ever hope for. Then came the kicker. His father, who'd barely spoken a word all evening, looked at me with that smug little half-grin and said, "A woman who doesn't even rent her own place? How embarrassing." The table laughed again. Not all of them, but enough. I stared straight at my plate, suddenly more aware than ever of how small I was meant to feel. But I didn't. Not anymore. My heartbeat slowed. Not raced, slowed, like my body knew the moment had come. And that's when I did it. I set my glass down, not hard, not loud, just deliberately, like punctuation, like a period at the end of their sentence. No one noticed at first, but I could feel it shift inside me, something sharp, something steady. I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't playing nice. They thought they were talking to some girl out of her league. But they had no idea they were eating dinner in a house I had the power to take from under their feet. No one at that table knew what I was holding back. Not the anger, that was obvious, but the truth. The one thing they hadn't thought to imagine, because in their eyes, I didn't fit the profile. To them, I was Liam's cute little girlfriend, harmless and outclassed. They were so sure of their own version of me that the idea I might be something more didn't even cross their minds. And that was my advantage. I was invisible in all the right ways. Liam finally spoke, a weak, "Come on, guys," that sounded more like a whisper than a stand. Too late, too small, too careful. He looked at me like he knew something had shifted, but didn't quite understand what. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Because if I met his eyes, I might lose the edge I'd just found. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to dismantle their smug little reality one sentence at a time. So I took a breath, lifted my head, and as the laughter faded and the next glass of wine was being poured, I decided they'd had enough rope. The game was over. I'd played nice, I'd smiled, I'd let them take their shots. But now it was my turn to speak. And I knew exactly where I was going to start. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just smiled, for real this time, and said, "Actually, this house, the one you're living in, it's mine." That line landed like a pin dropped in a cathedral. For a second, I thought maybe they hadn't heard me. They blinked, tilted their heads, waiting for the punchline. But I didn't laugh. I didn't flinch. I just reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, already cued to the folder they weren't expecting. At first, they kept chuckling, nervous, dismissive. One aunt even said, "Oh, that's adorable," like I was pretending to be a princess for the night. But then I handed the phone to Liam's mother. "Take a look," I said, casually sipping my water. The screen lit up with a deed. My name. Well, technically, the name of my LLC, a quiet little company I'd used to invest in properties years ago. There it was, clear as day. Purchase date, lot number, signature. Their laughter didn't just die, it choked. I watched it register. One by one, their faces changed. Not all at once, but like a wave hitting a shoreline. His dad leaned forward, squinting. His cousin stopped mid-bite. Liam didn't say a word. I wasn't showing off. I wasn't trying to humiliate anyone. I just wanted to stop the bleeding. to show them they were standing on assumptions as fragile as glass, and I was the one holding the hammer. His mother's fingers trembled slightly as she scrolled through the documents. I didn't rush her. I let the silence do the work. Property tax receipts, signed by me. Utility transfers, authorized by me. The address they were all sitting in, printed clearly at the top of every page. I could see the color drain from her face, like she was trying to figure out how a girl who probably lived with roommates could hold the keys to their lives without them ever knowing. I bought it as an investment property, I said, as calmly as if I were discussing the weather. A few years ago. Through a company name, thought I'd flip it eventually, but the rental income was good. I didn't tell them I hadn't even realized who the tenants were until I met Liam. That part didn't matter now. What mattered was the shift, the way the room had gone from judgment to disbelief, and disbelief to something close to fear. They weren't looking at me anymore. They were reevaluating me, rewinding every smug comment, every side glance, every laugh they'd let ring out at my expense. It was almost poetic, how fast they moved from superiority to silence. I didn't need to raise my chin or square my shoulders. The documents spoke for themselves. I'd spent the night sitting quietly at their table, letting them size me up, and now they were realizing they'd been dining under my roof. I leaned back slightly, letting them sit with it. The air in the room felt heavier now, like everyone was holding their breath but didn't quite know why. Liam finally spoke, voice low and shaky. Wait, are you saying this is your house? I turned to him and gave the smallest nod. I didn't know at first, I said. But yes, it's mine. I own it. Have for a while. I wasn't angry anymore. That moment had passed. Now I just felt resolved. Their father was the only one still trying to recover his footing. But why wouldn't you say something earlier? He asked, blinking like he'd missed a crucial plot twist. I smiled again, not out of smugness, but from something much deeper. Because I wasn't here to impress anyone, I replied. I was here to be part of something. But I see now, some people can't look past a paycheck to recognize value when it's standing right in front of them. And that's when I said it, softly, clearly, like the closing of a book. So no, I don't rent, but you do. I stood up slowly, letting the words settle into the cracks they'd spent all night widening. No one said a thing. Not a laugh, not a gasp, just the sound of someone's fork gently hitting their plate. I didn't need to yell or throw a tantrum. I just told the truth. And sometimes the truth is heavier than anything you could possibly throw. No one moved. No one breathed. I've never heard a room go that quiet before, like the air had been sucked out and replaced with stunned silence. His mother sat frozen, her hand still resting on the phone. His father blinked like he'd just come out of anesthesia. And Liam looked at me like he was meeting a stranger. Like the version of me they'd all decided on had been shattered, and now they didn't know what to do with the pieces. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just stood there, calm and steady, letting the weight of their own words settle around them. The power I felt in that moment wasn't about money or property. It was about finally being seen, without having to raise my voice to do it. I glanced at Liam, hoping, maybe, for a spark of recognition. But what I saw was panic. Not regret, not outrage. Just fear of what this meant for him. For them. For everything they thought was safely theirs. I adjusted the strap on my purse, took one last look around the dining room and said, I didn't come here to prove anything, but maybe now you'll stop measuring worth by square footage. No one responded. Not even a whisper. It was like they were all holding back 100 apologies they didn't know how to say. And that was fine. I didn't need to hear them. I turned toward the door, heels clicking softly against the floor. I'd never felt taller. I had barely stepped off the porch when I heard him behind me. Jane! Wait! His voice cracked. That same voice that had stayed so conveniently quiet all night. I didn't stop right away. I let him catch up, let him feel what it was like to chase after someone who had already made up her mind. He grabbed my arm, gently, like he wasn't sure if he had the right anymore. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, eyes searching mine like the answer might fix everything. I took a breath, steady and slow. Because it was never about the house, Liam. It was about how they looked at me. And how you didn't say a thing while they did. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Just this blank panic, like someone realizing they'd slept through a fire alarm. He started mumbling something about how he hadn't wanted to embarrass anyone, how he didn't know what to say. I shook my head. You didn't need to know what to say. You just needed to care that they were wrong. He looked like a boy then. Not a man. Not someone I could rely on. Just a boy who'd been raised to avoid discomfort at all costs, even when someone he cared about was being stripped down with words. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just let the silence stretch between us, thick with everything he hadn't said when it mattered. He reached for me again, slower this time, but I was already turning away, because some silences speak louder than any apology could. I didn't look back when I reached my car. I didn't need to. I could still feel him standing there, stuck between guilt and helplessness, trying to process that the person he let them mock was never the one who needed their approval. The engine hummed to life beneath my fingers, smooth and quiet, like it understood the moment too. I sat there for a beat, watching the house, my house, glowing behind me, filled with people who had finally run out of things to say. They hadn't expected me to leave like that. With my head high, with their own assumptions folded neatly and handed back to them like a receipt. For so long, I had convinced myself that if I just tried hard enough, they'd let me in. That I'd earn my place at their table. But I realized something on that drive home. I never needed a place at a table that only had room for who they thought I was. And that kind of table, it was never built for me in the first place. My phone buzzed with a string of messages, most of them from Liam. I didn't read them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because there's a kind of power in walking away without slamming the door, in knowing you didn't need to yell to be heard. And tonight, they heard me, even in the silence, especially in the silence. A few weeks passed before I made the decision, not out of spite, not in anger. I just sat down one morning, coffee in hand, and filed the paperwork. Clean, simple. Just a few signatures, and the house would be sold. I chose a developer I trusted, someone who wouldn't try to sugarcoat things. Within days, the notice went out. The lease would not be renewed. 90 days to vacate. No exceptions. I didn't smile when I read the confirmation. I just felt done. Liam called, then texted, then called again. He asked me to reconsider, said his parents were really sorry, that they didn't mean it, that they were just old-fashioned. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. They were sorry now. Not when I sat at their table, swallowing every insult, but now, when the ground beneath them was suddenly up for sale. It's not about revenge, I told him. It's about boundaries. Yours are still missing. He tried guilt. You're kicking my family out of their home. But that was the thing. It was never their home. They never imagined it belonged to someone like me. They thought I was background, decoration, convenient. What they didn't realize was that I'd been holding the deed all along, not just to the house, but to the narrative they tried to write me out of. And I was done living by their script. I knew people would talk. That some would call it petty or extreme. But those people weren't in that dining room. They didn't hear the tone, feel the weight of every judgment masked as concern. They didn't know what it's like to be dismissed by a room full of strangers who think they already have you figured out. I wasn't punishing them. I was protecting myself. And I was finally, unapologetically, putting an end to the story they'd tried to write for me. The profit from the sale was more than I expected, more than I needed. I could have gone on a trip, bought something flashy, made a point with receipts and headlines. But that's not who I am. That was never the point. Instead, I thought about all the girls like me, the ones who smile through dinner while being quietly erased, the ones who get talked down to because their careers don't come with corner offices or country club memberships. The ones who get underestimated right up until the moment they're not. So I started something. Quietly, without press releases or social media noise. I called it the No One's Doormat Foundation, a scholarship fund for women who've had to prove their worth twice just to be seen once. I set it up in honor of every time I bit my tongue, every time I smiled when I should have spoken. It wasn't revenge. It was redirection, taking something that once tried to shrink me and using it to lift someone else higher. I never told Liam about the foundation. He wouldn't have understood. To him, it would have just been another way to twist the knife. One more move in a game he never realized I stopped playing the moment he stayed silent. But it wasn't about him. It never really was. This was for every woman who's ever been talked over, sized up, or left to prove herself in a room that never gave her a chance. It was for the girl I used to be, and the woman I've become. They moved out, eventually, quietly, no big scene. I heard from someone that his parents are still stunned by the whole thing, as if the most shocking part wasn't their own behavior, but that I had the means, and the will, to stand up to it. Funny, isn't it? How people only start paying attention once their comfort is interrupted. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to burn anything down. I just changed the locks on a house they never truly owned. And me? I walked away from that chapter with something far more valuable than closure. I walked away with clarity, with peace, with a fire I never planned to light but refused to put out. I walked in as the girl who couldn't afford rent, and left as the woman who owned their address.